There's a particular kind of silence that falls over a room when something true is about to be said. Not awkward silence, not polite silence. The heavy, electric kind, the kind that presses against your chest and makes you forget to blink. That's the silence I heard when my husband stood up at our wedding reception, took the microphone from the best man, and looked out at 170 people like he was about to crack the world open. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually begins. Not with the wedding, not with the speech, but with the lie I told myself for 31 years. The lie that sounded like this. This is just how families work. I grew up in Utah, pretty mountains, clean air, the kind of place where people smile at strangers and nobody talks about the ugly things happening behind freshly painted front doors. My parents owned a small chain of auto dealerships, not rich but comfortable. The kind of comfortable where you never worry about groceries but you still argue about the thermostat. My brother Evan was 2 years younger than me, and from the day he showed up screaming in a hospital blanket, the world rearranged itself around him. I don't say that with bitterness. Not anymore, anyway. I say it the way you'd describe gravity. It just was. Evan got the attention. Evan got the excuses. Evan got the soft landings. And me? I was the lamp in the corner of the living room. Useful. Steady. Expected to keep the light on without ever asking someone to change the bulb. My mother had a way of wrapping favoritism in language so pretty, you almost didn't notice the knife inside it. It's not that we love him more, Sophie, he just needs more support. He has a sensitive spirit. A sensitive spirit that somehow required brand new trucks at 17, ski trips to Aspen, and a college education he dropped out of twice, but sure, sensitive. My father was simpler about it. He didn't dress it up. He just said, family priorities, like those 2 words explained everything. And for a long time they did, because when you hear something often enough as a kid, it stops sounding like an opinion and starts sounding like physics. So I became the kind of woman who made spreadsheets instead of demands. I got a job at an education charity, grants, metrics, outcomes. I fixed things quietly. I solved problems with systems instead of shouting. I lived close enough to my parents to visit, but far enough to pretend that distance was a boundary. And then I met Dylan. Dylan is a financial analyst, which sounds boring until you realize what that actually means. It means he sees patterns. It means when someone tells him a number doesn't add up, he doesn't shrug. He pulls the thread until the whole sweater unravels. He's calm the way deep water is calm, still on the surface, powerful underneath. We got engaged on a Saturday morning, no fancy proposal, no flash mob. He made me coffee, sat across from me at our tiny kitchen table and said, I want to build a life with you. A real one. Not the kind where you shrink to fit someone else's idea of who you should be. I cried. Not because it was romantic, though it was, but because nobody had ever said that to me before. Nobody had ever looked at me and said, you don't have to be smaller. We picked our date fast, June 21st, first real weekend of summer, long daylight, warm mountain air, the kind of evening that turns golden right when you need it to. We found a resort near Park City with a terrace overlooking the mountains, the kind of view that makes people grab their phones and then put them away because they realize a screen can't hold it. We booked it a year out, signed contracts, paid deposits, sent save the dates. I built a planning spreadsheet so detailed it could have launched a satellite. When I told my parents, my mother sounded almost warm. Oh, that's a beautiful date. The weather will be perfect. My father said he'd help with planning, which in my family was the emotional equivalent of a bear hug. For a little while, things felt almost normal. The good kind of normal, not the trained kind. My mother started forwarding vendor suggestions like she'd discovered Pinterest for the first time. My father asked about parking logistics. Evan didn't acknowledge any of it, which honestly felt like a gift. Then spring came, and with it, the crack. It started with a Tuesday phone call. I was sitting at my kitchen table, halfway through a work email about scholarship distribution, when my mother's name lit up my screen. I picked up because I always picked up. Good daughters pick up. Her voice had that brightness to it, the particular sparkle she used when she'd already decided the answer to whatever she was about to ask, and just needed you to agree. So, she said, like we were sharing gossip over wine. Evan booked his ski trip. I blinked at my laptop. It's April. And it's Whistler, she said, like the word deserved a standing ovation. Whistler Blackcomb. He got this incredible package, Chalet, private lessons, helicopter excursions. The whole thing. That sounds expensive, I said, carefully. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I could hear the smile in her voice. He already paid for it. My stomach did that slow sinking thing, the kind your body does before your brain catches up. What are the dates? She said it like she was reading a grocery list, like she wasn't about to take a sledgehammer to a year of planning. June 21st week. I didn't respond fast enough, so she filled the silence the way she always did, by telling me what to do. Maybe you could move the wedding. Not a question, a correction, the way you'd tell a child to fix her posture. Mom, we can't. The contracts. He already paid, she repeated, sharper now. You know how hard it is to get reservations like that. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because my body had no other way to process the sheer absurdity of what I was hearing. My mother was asking me to reschedule my wedding, venue, vendors, 170 guests, so my 29-year-old brother could go skiing. Invitations are out, I said. Deposits are paid. The resort is booked. We've been planning this for a year. The warmth left her voice like heat, leaving a room when someone opens a window in January. Well, you could have picked a date that worked for everyone. It does work for everyone, it just doesn't work for Evan's vacation. Sharp inhale. You always have to make it sound like he's doing something wrong. I'm not. But I'm not moving my wedding for a ski trip. Silence. Not the thinking kind, the punishing kind. The kind my mother wielded like a weapon my entire childhood. The withdrawal of warmth until you apologized for having a feeling. Then she said, almost sweetly, "Let me talk to your father." The call from my father came a few days later. He didn't bother with a greeting. He never did when he'd already made up his mind. My father didn't do feelings, he did verdicts. Family comes first. I was at my desk at work, staring at a progress report that suddenly looked like a foreign language. "This is my wedding, Dad." He exhaled slowly, the exhale of a man dealing with a difficult employee. "You're being selfish." My pulse climbed into my ears. I'm being selfish because I won't reschedule my wedding for a vacation? It's not just a vacation, he snapped. It's Evan. He already paid. He's excited. His voice went cold. You always want things your way. I wanted to say, I have never had things my way. I wanted to list every recital they missed, every birthday that became about Evan, every time I swallowed my own disappointment like bitter medicine and smiled afterward. But in my family, arguing was disrespect. Facts were only facts when they supported the hierarchy. So I just said, quietly, I'm not changing the date. The pause that followed was surgical. I could almost hear him selecting the words designed to hurt the most. If you won't change the date, maybe this will teach you humility. The word landed like ice water on bare skin. Then he added, don't expect us to be there. My hand squeezed the phone so hard my knuckles ached. My face went perfectly still, the way it always did when something shattered inside me and I needed to keep the pieces invisible. I didn't beg, I didn't cry, I didn't say please or but you're my parents or how can you do this? I said, then don't come. And I hung up. That night, I told Dylan everything. Sitting on our couch with my shoes still on and my coat still zipped, like I hadn't fully committed to being home yet. Like part of me was still standing in that phone call, frozen. Dylan didn't react the way my family would have predicted. No outburst, no lecture, no dramatic pacing across the living room. He just sat next to me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, and listened. Really listened. The kind of listening where someone's face changes as the story unfolds, where you can watch them absorbing not just the words but the weight behind them. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, slowly, like he was tasting something bitter, they're really going to boycott your wedding over a ski trip. It's not about the ski trip, I said, and I hated how exhausted my own voice sounded, like I'd been running for years and only just noticed. It's about control. His jaw tightened. I watched something shift behind his eyes. Not anger exactly, something colder, something more precise. Evan paid for all that himself? He asked. Chalet, helicopter excursions, that's tens of thousands of dollars. Probably, I shrugged, and the shrug felt like a lifetime of shrugging, like muscle memory. But he'll figure it out. He always does. How? My parents help him. Dylan stared at the ceiling for a beat, then looked back at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Careful, calculated, the look he gets when numbers start whispering something ugly. Do you remember that fund your grandmother left? I went still. It had been years. After my grandmother died, there'd been hushed conversations behind closed doors, paperwork I was never invited to touch, adult voices making adult decisions about things I was told I'd understand later. My mother had mentioned it once, almost casually, like she was telling me about a coupon she'd clipped. Grandma wanted to set something aside for you, for a big life moment, wedding, house, whatever. I'd nodded like the good daughter I'd been trained to be. I never asked to see statements. I never requested paperwork. Because in my family, asking for proof was the same as calling someone a liar, and calling someone a liar was the worst thing you could do. Worse than actually lying, apparently. I remember it, I said carefully. Dylan's face didn't change. Do you know where it is? Something inside my chest pulled tight. My parents manage it. He leaned closer. Sophie. Do you have anything in writing? I stared at him. Why are you asking me this? His voice dropped, gentle but serious. Because this whole thing smells wrong. Here's what you need to understand about Dylan. He doesn't investigate things the way people do in movies. No dramatic confrontations, no slammed folders on desks, no secret meetings in parking garages. He does it the way he does everything. Quietly, patiently, methodically. Like a man pulling a single thread from a sweater, knowing that if he pulls long enough and steady enough, the whole thing will come apart in his hands. Over the next 2 weeks, he asked me for every document I'd ever received from my parents involving money. Old emails I'd never reread, a scanned letter from years ago with my grandmother's executor information, a tax form I'd signed without reading because my father told me it was routine, and I believed him, because why wouldn't I? He was my father. Fathers don't lie to their daughters about tax forms, except sometimes they do. I felt ridiculous digging through ancient files, pulling up dusty PDFs and forwarded emails like I was excavating my own past looking for bones. But Dylan kept going. He searched public records. He found LLC filings tied to my parents' dealership network. He called phone numbers listed on old documents and asked questions in that pleasant, unhurried way of his. The tone that makes people answer honestly without realizing they're handing over something important. Then one night, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop glowing in front of him and said 2 words that rearranged my entire life. I found it. My stomach fell through the floor. Found what? The transfer. He turned the screen toward me. A bank document, clean, official, completely indifferent to how it was about to destroy me. The kind of paper that doesn't care about your feelings. It just states facts and lets you deal with the wreckage. Amount, $68,000. Date, a few months before our wedding. Sender, an account tied to the family fund. My fund, the one my grandmother left for me. Recipient, Evan. Memo line, travel. One word, bland, almost mocking, like taking $68,000 from your sister's inheritance to fund a ski vacation was so unremarkable it barely deserved a description. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. My brain kept trying to reject it, kept looking for the version of reality where this wasn't what it looked like. That can't be right, I whispered. It is, Dylan said. Steady. No drama, just truth. The kitchen air felt thin suddenly, like we'd gained altitude without moving. Maybe it was a loan, I heard myself say. He shook his head. No repayment structure, no promissory note, nothing. And the account it came from, Sophie, it's in a structure that was specifically meant for you. This isn't even subtle. I pressed my fingertips against my lips, and in that terrible, airless moment, I thought about my grandmother. Her hands, thin and spotted with age, pulling me onto her lap when I was small. Her voice in my ear. You have a good head on your shoulders, sweetheart. Don't let anyone talk you out of using it. My throat closed. They took it. Dylan's eyes never left mine. And they gave it to Evan. I should have screamed. That's what people imagine, right? That you'd flip the table, grab your keys, drive to your parents' house, and demand answers with mascara running down your face like something out of a movie. But I didn't do any of that. I sat perfectly still, the way I'd been sitting still my entire life, absorbing the blow, keeping the damage invisible, holding the broken pieces together with nothing but silence and good posture. Dylan reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "There's more," he said. That's when he showed me the messages. Not messages between him and my parents. He'd never contacted them. Messages between Evan and my parents. A thread he'd found documented in the account records, casual and careless, like they were discussing what to order for dinner instead of stealing from me. One message in particular made my vision narrow. 5 words that burned themselves into my brain with a clarity I will never be able to unsee. Evan had written, "Just take the money from Sophie's fund. She'll probably move the wedding anyway." I read it 3 times, not because the words were complicated, because they were so simple, so easy, so completely devoid of guilt or hesitation. He knew it was mine. He knew what it was for. And he took it anyway, the way you'd grab someone else's umbrella on your way out the door, without thinking, without caring, because you've always been the person who gets to take. The next morning, I called Evan and asked him to meet me for coffee. Not at our parents' house, where the walls would side with him out of habit. A little cafe in Park City, neutral territory. Overpriced pastries. A view you were basically paying rent on. He showed up late, sunglasses on indoors. Kissed my cheek like everything was fine between us. "What's up?" he asked, already scrolling his phone. I didn't ease into it. I didn't wrap it in softness the way I'd been doing my entire life, translating my pain into language gentle enough that nobody would have to feel bad about causing it. "Did you take $68,000 from Grandma's fund?" He blinked. Then he let out one sharp laugh, the kind that's designed to make you feel stupid for asking. "Wow, okay, straight to the accusation." "It's not an accusation," I said. "It's a bank transfer." His face tightened. "Why are you digging around in stuff you don't understand?" And there it was, that phrase, "you don't understand." The leash my family had kept me on since childhood. The magic words that were supposed to make me sit down, shut up, and stop asking questions. "I understand numbers," I said. "And I understand ownership." His jaw flexed. "Mom and Dad said it was fine." "So you knew it was mine." He scoffed, leaned forward, dropped his voice like he was letting me in on a secret I was too naive to grasp on my own. "You're 31, Soph. You've got a solid job. You've got Dylan. You're fine. I needed it. For a ski trip." He rolled his eyes. Actually rolled his eyes at me, like I was being dramatic about having my inheritance stolen. "For an experience. For networking. For, look, why are you doing this? You're really going to blow up the whole family over money?" Over money, not over betrayal. Not over theft. Not over the fact that my wedding, my life, was being held hostage by people who were supposed to love me. Just money, like that's all it was. I watched his face for a long moment, and something inside me went cold and clear, like mountain water. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't even nervous. He was annoyed, inconvenienced. I had scratched his car and he wanted me to pay for the paint job. "Are you still going to Whistler?" I asked. He hesitated. Just a flicker, barely there. Then the smug smile slid back into place. "Yeah, unless you decide to be reasonable and move your wedding." I sat back. My spine straightened in a way it hadn't in years. "I'm not moving it." His smile shrank. "Then don't expect Mom and Dad to choose you over me." There it was. The family law, spoken out loud for once instead of just enforced in silence. Gravity points toward Evan. Always has. Always will. I nodded once, slowly. "Okay." He frowned. "Okay?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "Enjoy your trip." No shouting, no threats, no begging. I picked up my bag, pushed my chair in, and walked out of that cafe into mountain air that hit my face like cold water after a fever. Something had shifted. Something old and heavy had cracked loose from inside my chest and fallen away, and in its place was something I almost didn't recognize. Clarity. That afternoon, Dylan and I sat at our kitchen table, the same table where he'd shown me the bank documents, and we made the plan. If my parents wanted to weaponize my wedding to teach me a lesson about humility, fine. We'd teach one of our own. Just not the kind they were expecting. We hired a lawyer. We didn't announce it. We didn't send angry texts or make threatening phone calls. We just gathered everything: the fund paperwork, the transfer records, Evan's messages, the documentation showing my parents had no legal authority to redirect that money. And we organized it the way Dylan organizes everything: precisely, patiently, like setting dominoes in a line and knowing exactly which one to tap first. The lawyer told us what was possible: demand letters, restitution, potential fraud charges depending on how the fund was structured and what authority my parents had claimed when they moved the money. That night, Dylan looked at me across the table. Folders between us, laptop open, the bones of my family's lies laid out under kitchen light, and said, "You don't have to do this." I stared at the ceiling for a long time. "Yes," I said, "I do, because if I don't, this is the rest of my life." The week before the wedding, my mother called one last time. Her voice had that syrupy quality, warm on the surface, calculated underneath. The voice she used when she wanted you to feel like she was doing you a favor by speaking to you at all. "So, have you thought about it?" "About what?" I said, even though I knew. "About being flexible." I could hear the smile, the one that expected obedience the way the sun expects the earth to keep spinning around it. "Evan's already packed. He's so excited. I just hate that this is turning into a whole thing." A thing. My wedding? A year of planning, 170 guests, the most important day of my life, reduced to a thing. An inconvenience standing between my brother and a helicopter ride over a glacier. "It's my wedding, Mom," she sighed. The dramatic kind. The kind she'd perfected over 3 decades of making me feel like my emotions were an imposition. "You always take things so personally." I let the silence sit there. Let it fill up the space between us like water rising in a room. Then she softened her voice. The mercy voice. The one that was supposed to make me grateful. "If you just move the date, we can all be happy." My throat was tight. My eyes burned, but my voice held. "I'm not moving it." The pause on her end was heavy enough to sink through the floor. Then, cold now, stripped of all pretense, she said, "Don't be surprised when people stop bending for you." Bending for me. Like I was the one who'd spent my life being accommodated. Like the universe had been revolving around Sophie this whole time, and I just hadn't noticed everyone else's sacrifice. "Okay," I said. And I hung up. I didn't call back. I didn't lie awake composing the perfect response in my head. I didn't draft a text and delete it 4 times. I just let the silence be what it was. Not a punishment, not a weapon, but a wall I was finally allowed to build. June 21st arrived the way perfect days do. Almost rudely beautiful, like the sky was showing off. Clear and bright and warm, the mountains standing behind the resort like bodyguards who'd been there for 1,000,000 years and planned to stay for 1,000,000 more. The terrace was set with white chairs and pale flowers that swayed in the breeze like they were slow dancing to music only they could hear. 170 people took their seats. Friends, co-workers, Dylan's parents and sisters and cousins, loud, loving people who hugged you whether you were ready for it or not. A handful of relatives from my side showed up looking slightly nervous, the way people look when they know a storm might be coming but aren't sure which direction it's blowing from. When the music started and I stepped onto that aisle, I made a choice. A small, deliberate, life-changing choice. I didn't look for my mother in the front row. I didn't scan for my father's face, searching for approval the way I'd been searching my whole life. In report cards, in job promotions, in every quiet achievement I'd laid at their feet, hoping this would be the one that made them see me. I looked at Dylan. He stood at the end of the aisle like he was holding the whole mountain in place, steady, present. His eyes locked on mine with something that wasn't just love. It was recognition. The look of someone who sees exactly who you are and isn't asking you to edit a single thing. The ceremony was simple. Honest vows, real words, the kind of moment where time seems to lean in and pay attention. And then my father stood up, not quietly, not with any attempt at subtlety. He scraped his chair back against the stone terrace loud enough that heads turned 3 rows deep. My mother rose beside him, lips pressed together so tight they disappeared into a single white line. Practiced, deliberate, a performance she'd probably rehearsed in the bathroom mirror that morning. My father's voice cut through the mountain air like a crack in glass. "We're leaving." A murmur moved through the guests, soft and involuntary, like wind bending tall grass. I felt 170 pairs of eyes swing toward me, waiting, watching, wondering what I'd do. My father looked directly at me. The expression on his face was one I'd seen 1,000 times, the look reserved for a child who refuses to learn her lesson. "Maybe one day," he said, loud enough for the last row to hear, "you'll understand what humility means." Then he walked out. My mother followed without looking back. Not a glance, not a hesitation. Like leaving your daughter's wedding was just another item on the day's to-do list, already checked off. 170 people watched my parents abandon me at the altar like it was a Broadway exit, staged, deliberate, designed to make sure everyone in the audience understood exactly who held the power. My hands didn't shake, my eyes didn't fill. I stood there in my white dress on that beautiful terrace with mountains behind me that had survived ice ages and earthquakes and every kind of storm this planet could throw at them, and I thought, I can survive this too. I turned back to Dylan. Something fierce moved behind his eyes. Not pity, not sadness. Something protective and furious and certain. He reached for my hand, and we finished the ceremony the way we'd planned it, with honest words and steady voices and a kiss that tasted like the beginning of something that belonged entirely to us. The reception that followed was beautiful and strange. People congratulated us a little too loudly, laughed a little too hard, danced a little too enthusiastically, the way humans do when they're trying to paper over something painful with joy. Nobody mentioned my parents. The empty chairs in the front row became the thing everyone saw and nobody acknowledged, like a crack in a painting that everyone agrees to pretend isn't there. I smiled. I thanked people. I danced with Dylan's father, who held me at arm's length and said, very quietly, "You're one of us now, sweetheart." And I nearly lost it right there on the dance floor, but I held it together. Because that's what I do. That's what 31 years of training looks like. You hold it together until your fingernails leave marks on your own palms, and you smile so convincingly that even you almost believe you're fine. When dinner was served and the band started warming up for the evening set, I sat at the head table with my champagne going flat and thought, maybe we just get through tonight. Maybe we keep it private. Maybe I swallow this the way I've swallowed everything else, whole, without chewing, without tasting, just pushing it down deep enough that it can't reach my face. Then Dylan stood up. He didn't look angry. Angry would have been easy to dismiss. People discount anger, write it off as emotional, call it an overreaction. No. Dylan looked composed, focused, like a surgeon who'd already studied the scans, mapped out the incision, and was now simply doing what needed to be done. He took the microphone. The room, still buzzing with leftover tension from the walkout, slowly went quiet. Not because he raised his voice, because he lowered it. "Before we start the speeches," he said, "there's something everyone here deserves to know." My heart hit my ribs once, hard. "You saw Sophie's parents walk out earlier today. You deserve to know why." Somewhere near the back, a chair creaked. A fork clinked against a plate and then stopped. Whoever was holding it suddenly aware that they'd made noise at exactly the wrong moment. Dylan nodded toward the big screen behind him. The slideshow, our slideshow, the one we'd put together on a quiet Tuesday night, laughing at our own terrible teenage haircuts, vanished. In its place, a bank document appeared, blown up large enough that even the people at the farthest tables could read every number. Amount, $68,000. Recipient, Evan. My stomach clenched, but my spine held. Sophie's parents didn't boycott this wedding because of a scheduling conflict, Dylan said, his voice carried without effort, the way truth tends to. A collective breath moved through the room, 170 people inhaling at once. They boycotted it because Sophie refused to move her wedding date so her brother could go on a ski trip to Whistler. Whispers started. Heads turned. Eyes went wide. Dylan didn't let the room spiral. He held it, steady, patient, in complete control. "This transfer," he said, pointing to the screen, came from a fund that Sophie's grandmother left specifically for her, for a major life moment. He let the words sit, let them land like stones dropping into still water. A few months before this wedding, that money was taken from Sophie's fund, without her knowledge, without her consent, and sent to her brother. The room went so quiet, I could hear the mountain wind brushing against the windows. Then Dylan clicked to the next slide, a screenshot of a text message. Evan's words, black against white, casual and careless and devastating in their simplicity. Just take the money from Sophie's fund. She'll probably move the wedding anyway. Someone near the front made a sound, half gasp, half disbelieving laugh, the kind of sound that escapes your body before your brain can catch it. I sat very still, my hands were freezing, my face was burning. Dylan's voice softened, just a fraction, just enough that I could hear the love underneath the steel. Sophie didn't beg, she didn't cry, she didn't try to force anyone to stay. She simply refused to be bullied out of her own wedding. He paused, scanned the room. Let the silence do its work. And today, when her parents stood up and told her this was meant to teach her humility, what they were actually doing was protecting a lie. I felt it happen. The exact moment the room's energy shifted. It wasn't sympathy anymore, not that pitying, head-tilting, oh how sad kind of feeling. It was something sharper, something with teeth. 170 people looking at the same evidence and arriving at the same conclusion at the same time. This wasn't family drama. This was theft, manipulation, a lifetime of it, distilled into one careless text message. Dylan lowered the microphone and looked at me. Just at me. Like we were the only two people in that ballroom. Sophie, he said quietly. But the room was so silent that every single person heard it. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. That's when I broke. Not dramatically, not loudly. The tears just came, sudden and hot, rolling down my face before I could stop them. I wiped them fast, almost annoyed at myself for cracking after holding it together so perfectly all day. And then I laughed, this soft, absurd little laugh. Because of course I would finally cry, not when my parents walked out, not when my brother stole from me, not during any of the 1,000 small cruelties I'd absorbed over 3 decades. I cried when someone stood up and did the thing my family had spent my entire life teaching me was forbidden. He told the truth. Out loud, where everyone could hear it. The morning after the wedding, while my bouquet was wilting in a glass of water on the hotel dresser and my feet were still swollen from dancing, Dylan sent the demand letter. No social media posts, no public rants, no dramatic phone calls, just paper, clean, legal, undeniable paper, the kind that pins lies to the wall and doesn't let them wiggle free. My parents called, naturally. My mother's voicemails sounded like audition tapes for martyrdom. How could you embarrass us like that? In front of everyone? My father's messages were colder, more threatening. You think you're clever? You think you've won something? Evan texted 3 words. Are you insane? I looked at my phone for a long time, then I typed back, no, I'm awake. The money came back slowly, not gracefully. There were threats, accusations, guilt trips dressed up as concern, shame disguised as love. My mother said I was tearing the family apart. My father said I'd regret humiliating them. Evan said I always had to ruin everything. I didn't argue with any of them. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. Because here's the thing I wish I'd understood 20 years earlier. People who benefit from misunderstanding you are never going to suddenly start listening. You can hand them clarity on a silver tray, and they'll knock it to the floor and blame you for the mess. The restitution agreement was signed. The fund was restructured so my parents could never touch it again. My lawyer made sure every document had teeth. And then I did the hardest thing, the bravest thing. The thing that felt like walking off the edge of a cliff and discovering that the ground had been right there all along, one step below where I'd been too afraid to look. I stopped chasing them. I didn't call my mother to soothe her wounded ego. I didn't apologize to my father for the consequences of his own choices. I didn't reach out to Evan to smooth things over, to perform the old familiar dance of pretending he'd made an innocent mistake when we both knew he hadn't. I let the silence between us be what it actually was, not a punishment, but a boundary. A line drawn in permanent ink. Months later, I ran into a cousin at a grocery store. She looked at me the way people look at someone they're not sure they're allowed to talk to, hesitant, uncertain, caught between family loyalty and her own conscience. Then she said, almost shyly, "I was at your wedding." I nodded. She swallowed. I never really knew about the way they treated you. Not really. Not like that. I thought about that ballroom, the screen glowing, 170 people finally seeing what I'd spent a lifetime swallowing in silence. I didn't either, I told her honestly. Not until I saw it written down. Some days, I still hear my father's voice in my head, teach you humility, like he was handing me wisdom instead of a wound. But the lesson he thought he was giving isn't the one I took. Humility isn't letting people take from you so the dinner table stays peaceful. It isn't making yourself smaller so someone else can feel large. It isn't absorbing blow after blow and calling it love, because the alternative, standing up, speaking out, being seen, feels too terrifying to consider. Humility is knowing you deserve to take up space. It's learning that being calm doesn't mean being compliant. It's understanding that if someone can only tolerate you when you're bending, when you're folding, when you're twisting yourself into whatever shape keeps them comfortable, they never loved you. They loved the silence. They loved the compliance. They loved the version of you that never talked back. Dylan and I still have our wedding photos. The terrace, the mountains, that ridiculous golden light. In one of the shots, my favorite one actually, you can see the front row clearly, 2 chairs. Empty. Perfectly, beautifully empty. People ask me sometimes if my parents ruined my wedding day. I tell them the truth. They tried. They walked out to teach me a lesson about humility. They wanted me to feel small in front of everyone I loved. They wanted the empty chairs to be a scar I'd carry forever. Proof that I should have bent, should have folded, should have stayed the quiet little lamp in the corner of their lives. But all they really did was give me something I'd never had before. A clean, clear line between who I actually am and who they spent 31 years trying to make me be. And when my husband stood up in that ballroom and 170 people went silent, when the truth finally landed in a room full of witnesses and there was nowhere left to hide it, what I felt wasn't humiliation. It was relief, because for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't the only one holding it.